Hey y'all, Father Jim Haney from St. Paul's in the Plains in Lubbock and Texas Tech, Canterbury. There's a book that's just a year younger than I am. It's a classic of sorts, Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. When I was younger, I was fascinated by this book. It does, in many ways, portray a very self sacrificial kind of love. If you don't know the story, there's a boy and a tree who have a relationship of love with each other. The boy hangs out with the tree, plays in the branches. Uh, but as the boy gets older, he is not there as often. He doesn't come by. And eventually, he needs other things. And he goes to the tree and he needs money, so the tree gives him her apples. Later, he's a little bit older, needs to build a house. She gives him her branches. Later on, he is fed up with life and decides he wants to sail off and go somewhere else. And she lets him cut down her trunk to sail off. And eventually, she's nothing but an old stump. And he's an old man by this time. And she offers him a place to sit. That's all she has left to offer. But every time, when the boy's playing in her branches, when she's giving her apples, when she's letting him take her branches and then her trunk, the refrain is, and the tree was happy. The message is the tree is happy by giving of herself on behalf of the boy. And it's interesting, as I get older, I find some aspects of this book pretty disturbing. Yes, on the one hand, it is a portrayal of self sacrificial love by the tree, and self sacrificial love is important, especially for Christians. But to give someone whatever they want all the time, there's a word for that in our culture, and that's codependency. It's not really helping the boy. The tree is not really helping the boy by giving and giving and giving and giving. There has to be a point where I think some tough love kicks in. And so I think we actually have a codependent giving tree here. And one of the keys to me, I think Shel Silverstein, I think the book's a little more complex than we first realized, at least than I first realized it. Because after she lets the boy cut down her trunk, he says the refrain, and the tree was happy, but then he says, but not really. But not really. The tree's not going to find happiness by letting the boy take total advantage of her. And it's also interesting that even when he's an old man, and he's an old man in the book, even at that point he's referred to as the boy. I think Shel's telling us something too. His behavior is awfully immature all the way through his life. Now, of course, God gives us tremendous gifts. We can't even begin to contemplate and fathom all that God gives us. And yet God doesn't give us everything. No loving parent gives their child everything they want whenever they want. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to set limits, and that's often the most loving thing to do. Sometimes I'll ask God for things, and I'll get exactly what I want, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I think God may be saying, all right, Jim, you really want this? Well, let's give it a try. See how this works out for you. Oh, that didn't work out quite like I thought it would. Oh, maybe we need to go to plan B. Sometimes God gives us enough rope to hang ourselves. But one thing we can celebrate, one good aspect of the giving tree, in spite of its dysfunction, in spite of its codependency, is the love that is shown for the boy. Even though I think the boy takes advantage of the tree is still an example of self-sacrificial love. And as we celebrate this Easter season, we remember Jesus' sacrifice for us and the new life that he offers us. We can perhaps take that lesson from the giving tree, but we also need to remember there are limits. Love is not always giving everything unconditionally. Sometimes you have to say, the most loving thing I can do for you right now is to say no. Sometimes you have to let people hit rock bottom before they can build their way back. So I leave you with my mixed reflections on the Giving Tree. A very warm and heartening book in some ways, a very disturbing and dark book in other ways. God bless. Have a wonderful day in the complex world that we live in with the complex relationships we have.